Hey, Colby here. If your business is making good money, but it still feels heavy every day, this video is for you. So it's not for total beginners. If you haven't really gotten your first sale or your first win yet, you can click off of this. But I'm really talking to the founder who already did the thing, like blood, sweat, and tears, white knuckled their way to $20, $30, $40,000 a month. And it doesn't feel the way it's supposed to. Because here's the uncomfortable truth, and we're going to dispel this today. Most people think they have a revenue problem. You don't have a revenue problem. You have a day-to-day problem. So here's what that looks like. Your calendar is owned by everybody else, particularly clients in your team. You are double checking your team all the time. Everything in your offer actually depends on you. And it's one of those things that basically as you make more money, your life gets tighter, like you experience less of what you actually want to do. So let's just say it's not your fault right now. You're not lazy, you're not bad at business. The problem is you just created a business that actually works really, really well. The problem is it only works because it's tied to you and your effort. And the reason everything you've tried hasn't fixed this, the team, the systems, the content, the scaling advice, is because they are all under the assumption that you need to do more. Get more clients, more leads, more output, more hustle. So you can actually build a bigger business, but you don't want a bigger business if it's at the cost of your health, your relationships, and living a life. You want a business that as it gets bigger, your life gets better. I know this because I played the game exactly the way you're playing it now. I followed the rules, I scaled, I hit the numbers, and we crossed 7 figures with my digital marketing agency that we got to global top 1,000 with a tiny team. And the year we did it, I burned out twice. That's when I stopped long enough to see something that most founders don't, is that money can't be the first goal. It needs to be the byproduct of an elite day-to-day. So in this video, I'm gonna show you the model that I rebuilt everything around. It didn't have to burn the agency down. I was able to move forward, not to necessarily make more money faster, although we did, but to build around an elite day-to-day that finally provided me autonomy so that the business felt lighter and we could go make the money we wanted to make without sacrificing our life. So strap in, grab a coffee, and we'll just kind of break down the problem that you're experiencing right now. And so much of it is actually down to basically what got you here won't get you there. So let's think of it this way. Is whatever you're at, let's say it's 20K a month, okay? How you got here was really blood, sweat, tears, a whole lot of frustration, a whole lot of potentially imposter syndrome, who knows, right? But essentially, you know that if you continue on this path, you are gonna be absolutely freaking screwed. And the reason for that is because of energy. You only have a finite amount. So when you are stretching yourself and connected to every aspect of the business, essentially what you're doing is you're gaining a millimeter of progress in a bunch of different directions, right? And so this could be content, this could be delivery with your offer, this could be managing your team. And before you know it, you are basically doing the same day over and over again. So when I talk about having an elite day-to-day, this is the opposite version of this. This is what we call building a business by default, not by design. And the way this looks like in principle is you know that if you want to get from 20K to 100K a month, and this is indicative of anywhere leading up to 100K a month, is that this is an absolute no freaking thank you, right? We call this noise. Essentially, there are so many things getting thrown at you. It's not that you have less time than everybody else. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. What this represents is basically decision debt. You are making so many decisions because everything is tied to you. Now, the perfect goal is how do we create a business that isn't tied to us all the time? And it's actually way simpler than you think. The whole this won't work for you to get to here is exactly right. But it's not some perfectly complex structure, and the reason like the courses you've bought and the books you've read and the videos you've watched and all that sort of stuff, the reason they don't work is because what they do is they're just another little arrow adding on, hey, you need to spend a bunch on ads, for example, or you need to become a content influencer, for example, or you need to hire a lead gen specialist or a sales representative or something like that. And all of that is just more. And it only creates a worse day-to-day. And what do they really do? They add expenses on something you already don't like because you built it by default, building it the same way everybody told you to build it. So what I'm about to tell you is gonna sound incredibly simple, but I'm telling you this because it was this very thing that got me in our agency from stuck at $1 million a year, where I was personally working 70 hours a week, saying yes to everything, improving myself, to this one model, this one ideology, this one principles-based thing that actually accelerated our growth. And within 12 months, we more than doubled. And we didn't hire, we didn't do ads, we didn't install somebody's system. We went back to basics. So this is gonna sound incredibly basic, But let's actually talk about what's at stake. The way you get from 20K to 100K a month is not some fancy system. It is eliminating decision debt. Because if you can get here with blood, sweat, and tears, no matter how much you think you have yet to learn, you are actually an A player by definition. You're incredibly successful, but you shouldn't be a prisoner to your success. It should liberate you, right? The only way you can truly liberate with success is by separating from having all this decision debt and getting your decisions down to basically one needle mover per day, one decision that makes everything work. So what we like to do is create businesses based on a North Star. So let me break down what a North Star is. You probably already know it, much like the real North Star, is it is this ball of fire in the sky, right? Now, if you actually ever got and touched the North Star, of course, you're gonna burn up, right? But think of that as representing, we're all gonna die someday, right? And there are so many people, in fact, I talked to a handful of clients just in the last week. One of them was like, they made their entire goal to pay off their mortgage, right? The moment they paid off the mortgage, her reaction was, now what? And that's essentially running your business where I want to make 100K a month, where money is the goal and not the byproduct of an elite day-to-day. Because ask anybody who's hit the goal, especially if they hit the goal doing it in a way that they don't actually like, this feels terrible. And when they hit it, they're not like, oh my gosh, now I've accomplished everything I want, the work is done. No. When I worked at the agency, I grew up as a poor kid. So for 7 years, I worked my ass off to get to a 6-figure salary, right? And we doubled a lot and did all the things that everyone told us to do. You can build a business and grow a business this way, absolutely. But the year I hit a 6-figure salary for the first time in my life, something I had wanted since I was like 10 years old, I burned out twice. And no amount of money, whether I made $1 million, that amount of money wouldn't have comforted me, right? I was running my business that was running my life into the ground. That's why if you have a North Star, that is a direction, right? And so essentially we want to boil it down to what's called first principles. What are first principles in a nutshell? You've heard, hey, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? The thing is that operating in this mode is that you are trying to eat the whole elephant. That's saying I want to get to 100K a month and having no idea how to get there, right? Whereas the goal should be a byproduct of doing one right thing at a time. And so first principles is basically saying there's always a smaller, more concise, easy truth to identify, not always easy to execute, but very simple to identify truth that you can execute. So if we take this as an example, if you want 100K a month, that either means you're selling a client basically at over $1 million a year, one client, but that's not the simplest truth, right? The simplest truth is, man, I don't have an offer that's gonna make me $1 million a year. I need to create an offer that makes me $1 million a year. And maybe that's not even the simplest truth is, maybe I need a little bit more market research or I need more conversation. Whatever it is, we turn that big thing into one next right thing. And by doing this, when you're only taking one action at a time, you are actually taking compounding steps towards living out your purpose. Now, my purpose is to hit my potential by helping the most people. You are never in neutral. So if I'm not walking towards and actually helping people and I'm just hoarding all the money I make, I'm stepping away from my North Star. Recording a video like this showing you how valuable first principles is stepping towards my North Star, because I'm gonna hit my potential by helping other people hit theirs by understanding that the person with 20 priorities has none. This person has 20 priorities and they wonder why they're not making any progress. This person has one priority and they just keep stacking the wins one thing at a time as they move forward, okay? So what's the big difference between this noise is we wanna cut out all of that decision debt so you have some signal. Essentially, if you wanna look at it, this guy over here, control, you have none. This one gives you control. And what I mean by control is basically the ability to say yes or no without fear. That's why I call my business autonomy. All right, so let's break this down in an even more succinct way, right? If you know that it's not actually your lack of knowledge, you have plenty of knowledge. It's not your lack of want and desire, you have plenty of want and desire. The problem is you're just answering way too many questions every single day. You have way too much decision debt tied to you and the business that you can't possibly make progress because you're having to say yes or no to most of the stuff. Quite literally, probably 80-90% of what you're answering every day shouldn't be crossing your desk at all. And it doesn't cross your desk when you're at 100K months because you've created a business by design, not by default. So essentially, if we just want to look at this, is that you have actually done the hard part. You've gotten from 0 to 1, right? So you're standing right around here to where you're making good money. But again, you know that the way to get to where you want, if you're going to scale cash, you don't want your life to scale downwards down here, right? We want life to go up, obviously. So the way you can actually do that, and I have personal experience with this, is this was my path, right? When we had the agency. Now we got to global top 1000 and all that sort of stuff, but this was essentially the path as we slowly went from zero. And had I continued, that's about how it would have gone. Now, my guess is that you're right around here as well, where I was burning out. And this is the point where you're like, do I burn it all down? Do I take this really long vacation and hope that solves my problem? You're the mental warfare going on inside of your mind right now is probably not that useful, right? You're thinking of escapism, you're thinking of burning it all down. The problem is that you have worked so freaking hard. You basically think of it as playing an instrument. You did a ton of hard work to get really good at piano. On the other side of this X is mastering piano. But what most people do is they just quit right here and then they start something new, which means they're basically picking up a violin and becoming a new beginner again. That's what we want to avoid, because if you put this much work into it, how do you actually do what everybody wants? Where, yeah, you put in this effort, you're up to here, but then we shoot up here, right? And this is where first principles thinking comes in. Now, the idea around this is that you subtract first, and I'm going to show you the model here in just a second. So what this looked like for me and a lot of founders is we're talking, 50 plus hour work weeks. I was working 70-hour work weeks. This is where we hit our first million a year. It was just with 4 people at our marketing agency and that sort of stuff, right? Had we continued along the way, I was working those 70 hours, saying yes to everything. And the problem with this too is how much it was affecting my life. I had been a dad for a few years and I had twins on the way. And it was one of those things where I was genuinely waking up every single day, like that kind of version of the Sunday scaries, but every single day, right? So how we actually moved from here is subtraction. And that's where I want to show you this model, because most people burn out, stagnate, or just kind of get complacent right here and start avoiding their own business right before they can reap the rewards. But the way to reap the rewards is not by doing more. You already know that you have too much decision debt. So the first thing we need to do is get rid of that decision debt. Now, I call this the autonomy path. And the reason for it is autonomy is the ability to say yes or no without fear. Right now, every decision you make is probably very fear-based. You're making decisions based on what is the upside of that? What is the cost-benefit analysis? Can I afford to say no to that because I might miss an opportunity? And these are things that with direction, when you have a filter, when you have a North Star, you don't actually have to have all this mental warfare, because it is very clear, am I stepping towards my North Star or away from my North Star, right? And so the first thing we do to combat this, to actually subtract, is what I call Space Maker. Space Maker is really just looking at 30,000 foot view of your business and saying, where's the leaks? Where am I saying yes too much? Where am I finding misalignment with what I actually want to do? And a good example of Space Maker is someone like Jacob. Jacob, I physically sat next to him and we were working basically 12-hour days together. He was working 6 days a week, 12-hour days, and sitting next to him, he was on meetings for 5 to 6 hours a day, to the point where he wasn't getting up to go to the bathroom, or he was hoping a meeting would cancel so he could grab a bite to eat. And he didn't have a kid at the time, he does now, but his transformation was basically, stuck in the 20, 30, 40K a month. Again, he could sell like an amazing person, but he was so attached to the business that with our 30,000 foot view of looking, we were basically able to eliminate 90% of the meetings to where he got it down to 3 or 4 meetings a week. We were able to actually fire a handful of clients who were sapping a lot of his energy. And what did Jacob do? With this space and with his North Star of helping people aligned and building their offer, he actually ended up doubling his business in a short amount of time. And now, he's a dad 1 day a week full time. He works 3 days a week. He works a max of 8 hours a day, right? So the thing is that when you're an A player, if you can lower the decision debt, you actually end up monopolizing what you're really good at, and you just completely cut out the stuff that you don't want to do. And Jacob's a really, really good example of that. And the cool thing about Space Maker is we really focus on time, where in the first 7 to 10 days, typically my clients are getting back 5 to 10 hours a week of blank space. We focus on team. Most of my clients come in with around 5 to 10 staff members, and we evaluate their team like absolutely objectively and realize that we can either consolidate a little bit, unfortunately let some of them go, of course, but if it's a relationship where neither one is thriving, you're not a charity and you're taking mental load to double check their work, most of my people end up lightening their team within the first 30 days or so. And then we also look at tools. Chances are there are hundreds of dollars sitting in your actual expenses right now that you don't need. Tools that you were supposed to do to scale the business that you don't actually utilize. So the idea is save 5 to 10 hours a week, save at least $1,000 in actual team, and save at least $100 in tools basically within the first week, which is really, really cool. The next one though, the reason you have so much decision fatigue as well is because you're out there hustling via scarcity. Now, when we went from $1 million a year to 2.5 million 12 months later, and I did this on an 8-hour week, that was not from adding a bunch of clients. What it actually was, because I made space for myself, and same thing with Jacob, because he made space, he was actually able to look into the business and say, where are the opportunities with who's already here? Essentially, ascending clients, upselling clients, providing more value, because you have more space, more mental fortitude to actually think of, what do I already have that I can leverage instead of chase, which is essentially what Kevin was doing. Kevin, absolute A player, making 50K months, but working his tail off again, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, dad of 4 kids. What Kevin needed to do was get away from all of this decision debt when we created some space to where he was answering Slack messages like every 3 minutes to we said, actually, you have an A player inside of your team. He hired really, really well. And so we made one of his team members the buffer between him and the day-to-day. That gave Kevin an elite day-to-day. What did Kevin go do? He had total conviction in his offer. We didn't even really tweak his offer that much. We just gave him space to talk about it more. And instead of actually getting new clients, which he also did as well, he went back to his original clients first and upsold them. And within 90 days, he hit his 100K month. And the cool thing is Kevin also created an elite day-to-day to where it was easy because they knew, liked, and trusted him. And now he goes and watches movies on like Tuesday afternoon and he plays board games with his kids every night. The thing about the retention engine is that we care a lot more about having fewer clients who stay for longer, people who already trust us, who want to continue paying us for that trust and value and working with us for a long time, rather than endlessly chasing. Every single person I work with, if you ask the question, would you rather have 10 clients that make $1 million a year or 100 clients that make $1 million a year, they'll all say 10 every single day of the week. And retention is what nobody really talks about. You know, all the programs and coaching and all that sort of stuff, they're going to sell you endless acquisition. And we think that that's where the problem is. But I'm telling you right now, that only eliminates space, which means you'll be constantly in this chase and churn, because you won't have the energy to serve them. So what are we talking about when actually retaining? We're talking about fewer clients, but better clients who stay for longer. The real profit is in not having to constantly go fishing and go fishing and go fishing. The real profit is in keeping people and building a foundation based on trust that when you have more space to add more clients in, you can absolutely do that, but it's based on compounding, and that's where the profits come from. We got to 2.5 million, only adding 10 clients that year. So we doubled the business by basically reinvesting in our existing clients and increasing their lifetime value, which is really, really cool. But once you have the space, and once you know that you're gonna be able to keep clients for a long time, you're actually gonna want to hop in the sandbox. And this is what I call the POV machine. Now, there's this beautiful statement that content fills space, POV shifts minds. And whether you're publishing content like this video here, or you're actually having a conversation, it's not actually the source material that makes sense. It is actually your experience, your reaction, your point of view to it. And Luis is a really good example of this because Luis has amazing skill. He is in the videography business and he can absolutely paint a scene even better than I can here. And I think this is pretty good, right? The problem is that he was doing what everybody else was telling him, right? He was creating content. He was talking about scale this or funnel that or system this. And it just resulted in him getting sales calls, sure, because he was running ads. But on those calls, he felt like he was convincing, coercing, and actually really struggling to get people to even pay him month-to-month payments for his offer. Whereas we said, scrap all that. What do you actually want to talk about? He wanted to talk about the tech of the videography side. He wanted to talk about his personal story and building the business. He wanted to talk about being a dad. And within 30 days, he was basically attracting dad videographers, and they were very happy to pay in full because his content was talking about what he cared about, which means not only did he have conviction and the energy went through, but he basically was saying, here's what I care about, where's my tribe? And people raised their hand and said, I'm your tribe. And he didn't have to convince and coerce them, and he was collecting pay in fulls. Not only was he doing that, he raised his prices and he kept collecting pay in fulls. And that's the beauty of point of view. The more and more you get out there, you hear build a moat around your business or category of one or whatever, build a personal brand. A personal brand needs to be built on POV. And this is how people with tiny audiences like me, I have less than 12,000 followers as I do this right now, can build six-figure businesses without being an expert at content, because we just tell really good stories. We find people who align with those stories, they raise their hands, and we start working with them. We call this creating demand on command. So what does Spacemaker do? You own your day-to-day. What does the retention do? You solidify predictability. And what does the POV machine do? You create demand on command. And the cool thing is, Luis was struggling with that, and now he makes $50K a month, and he's building a little tiny house out in the Colorado mountains. So also a dad, had his second kid, plenty of time. So I attract a lot of dads, as you can see. But whether you have kids or not, this is designed for A players who are struggling with decision debt, that if you can subtract with Spacemaker and then build a book of business that sticks for a long time, and then create demand based on what you actually care about, and find the people who care about it too, so you don't have to convince people you're valuable, they'll see it. That is how you create an elite day-to-day. And you will not be wanting for growth and money, right? Not all of my clients want to get to 100K a month. Some would be very, very happy with 40, 50K a month. But this is the way to actually get there faster. Instead of struggling and white knuckling and creating a life you resent, this is how you create something you freaking love. And so we call this autonomy, which I say is the ability to say yes or no without fear. Now, what's the final step in all this? And we're kind of limited on paper here, so we'll just target it right down here, is if you have your North Star and you have your direction, the way we do it inside with my clients is we just do a simple Google Doc. We call it the North Star document. It is a fluid source of truth. We are what we repeatedly see and do, right? And so instead of living in this world with vision board porn and all that kind of stuff where you just set goals every January and these big, hairy, ambitious goals or SMART goals or whatever it is. The goal is a destination. A North Star is a way of life. It's a direction. And so we look at that direction every single day. My clients pull out their North Star document within the first 90 seconds of every single day. They see, what do I want? What is my purpose? What direction am I heading? And then right below that, they look at their next right thing, and they only do one thing at a time. You see, your biggest problem isn't that you don't have the information, that you're lazy, that you're broken, that you've built a shitty business. That's not the problem. The problem is that you are making too many decisions that you don't know what the next right one is. And because you don't know what the next right one is, it's probably because you're not basing it on direction. You're basing it on noise. You're being reactive. You let messages and other people's ideas be the first thing that moves your business. And that's why it's so fucking hard, is because you're building a business by default, not by design. How do you move forward? How do you get what you want, right? You need to know your direction. Without a North Star, you are just living your life with reactivity. You are letting what comes up dictate your life instead of having a filter that says, I know where I'm headed. And anything that doesn't apply to that doesn't get entertained. And anything that does apply to that, I'm all in on. That's your North Star, right? How do you execute it? With your next right thing, right? So let's do next, right? One at a time, right? This is the bottom of the spear. This is the thing that actually pushes you forward. One thing at a time. The person with 20 priorities has none. The person with one priority who can execute it with focus, essentially to a point where all the people I'm helping are getting closer and closer and closer to only needing 90 minutes of focus every single day to move their business forward. 90 minutes. If they work more than 90 minutes, that's bonus. They'll get further faster, right? But they only need that 90 minutes to actually move the business forward because they know exactly what this is. And they know exactly what this is because we work together on it. But here's the deal. To make this actually work, you need to know what challenges are you experiencing, right? There is no, this is always easy all the time, or the model's gonna solve all my problems. The model is a vehicle, right? So we want you to have the sexiest car on the block. This is the engine that gets the car out of the garage, all right? Which means you also need to celebrate the wins as well. If you don't know what the challenges are or are not willing to share them, you're not gonna get anywhere. And if you're not willing to say, man, look how far I've come. The people I work with, they can look back 3 months and say, oh my gosh, look how much I've done. These are people who have been in their businesses white knuckling things for years to look back 3 months and be like, holy shit, how did I get this far? I was struggling in this one spot for years, 3 months, now I'm here. Win, 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 win. It doesn't happen from a perfect system. It happens from knowing your next right thing and how it applies to the filter of your life. That's how simple it is. Right, so you got to the end of this video. If you actually feel like you fit this profile to where you feel like you've been in decision debt and you actually want to get out of decision debt and have a direction be the filter of your life, focus on one thing at a time, not 20 things at a time, and use first principles to actually get where you want to go, because what got you here will not get you there, then really simply, conversation. I have a Calendly link down below. You can book a time with me. There's no salesperson. There's no fancy funnel. There's no spam or any of that sort of stuff. It's literally, you book a time with me, we chat about it, no pressure conversation. I only work with people I know I can help, where it has to be a hell yes for both of us. And so I don't know that yet. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask you a bunch of questions and make sure that this actually applies. If it doesn't apply, I won't recommend it. If it does apply, then we can take the logical next step. And either way, I'll give you a couple systems as well. The best system I have for SpaceMaker, the best system I have for Retention Engine, and the best system I have for POV Machine. And you can use those for completely free, something my clients pay thousands of dollars for, just for you coming to the call. I'm very happy to share those as well. But again, no pressure. We'll find out if it makes sense for us to work together and all that sort of stuff. But it starts with a conversation. All I know is that what got you here won't get you there. And so whether it's with me or without me, I hope this video was helpful to you. And yeah, if you got enough value out of this and think that I could be useful to you, then go ahead and click the Calendly link down below, grab a time with me, and we'll have a chat.